two quick notes before we get into this second passage. First, this does come straight from the course files, so you're going to see me explain not just why right answers are right, but also how to arrive at those answers. Second, there will probably be some times when it seems like I just sort of passingly allude to some big idea, and that's because I've talked about that big idea in much more detail in the theory portion of the course videos. All right, let's go. I like this second passage. I mean, it's hard, but it's not so hard when you take the structural reading we've been talking about. Look at the ascription that opens the passage. Most socio-historical interpretations. And from the beginning, I am now a little torn, right? Had she simply said some socio-historical interpretations, I would know exactly where we were headed with this. They're wrong. But knowing that most of them do this thing, maybe she's setting us up to explain what it is that they do. But this, again, is active reading, all right? Most of them do this thing. Here's an example. Taruskin. High art is produced by and for political and social elites. So they say that high art is for expressing the ideals of the elite. You know the but is coming now, right? And here it is at the end of the paragraph. However, there are actually two different ways that art is produced by and for the elite. Look at the scare quotes around it again. And then we get the two different ways. And pause here in this second paragraph, because these two different ways are not simple and straightforward in the manner of the itemizations in the first passage in this section. They are obviously related to one another. What is it that makes them different? And, don't move past this second paragraph until you understand it. Because why would you? How are you going to answer a question right if you don't understand what you read? So the first way is just for display. The first way that art can be produced is just as an ostentatious display. Hey, y'all, check out what I had the money to have commissioned. The second way would be to commission art that supposedly really does embody your ideals. And it is this second way that Taruskin embraces, Taruskin and his ilk. So they leave out the whole idea that just because you commissioned the art doesn't mean that you approved of the art. So the main point of this passage in this ascriptive structure is the but so. Taruskin says that it embodies their ideals, but there are really two ways that you can have it produced, so Taruskin is wrong. And there's our main point. Taruskin, who thinks that the art always embodies the ideals, is wrong to think that. That is, I'm using wrong as shorthand because it's a oversimplification, Taruskin is leaving out the other half of the equation, in other words. Third paragraph, Taruskin likes to deal with the second art, the art that expresses the ideal. Why? Because it enables them to construct an analysis. So we're given a reason why they like it, and then we go on to puncture that reasoning. But in order for that reasoning to hold, you would have to have, in line 25, the elite having a recognizable identity, and also you'd have to, in line 29, eliminate the possibility that artists are just subverting those ideals on purpose for their own nefarious reasons. Are those things true? I don't know. Taruskin just assumes that they are. Fourth paragraph, nothing much to say except Matthew Arnold hates the elites. The aristocrats are barbarians, and the middle class, the bourgeoisie, are Philistines. Don't hold anything back, Matthew. Tell it like it is, man. Final paragraph. I just want to note again the attitudinal marker in the last sentence, line 50. They claim that there's hidden ways in which this art embodies the ideals, which is this dense Freudian web of stupidity, I mean, you have to try to pretend that it really is embodying their ideals, even in a case when they were overtly, they meaning the elite, were overtly disapproving of the art. But no, really deep down on the inside, subconsciously, it expresses their ideals. And that use of the word claimed by itself, that's why we're studying these attitudinal markers, right? Because it makes it so clear that the author is using some seldom seen sarcasm. Okay, I'm ready to answer. The setup in line 8 with the but, so. There are actually two ways. So, Taruskin is wrong is the main point. The purpose, obviously, to advocate. The attitude, Taruskin is wrong. All right. Question number 7, the main point of the passage, Taruskin is wrong. That is to say, the socio-historical explanations that focus on art as expressing the ideals of the upper class are missing half the picture. But see how much easier it is to simply say in your mind and in your heart, Taruskin is wrong. And having that answer then gives us answer choice B. I will point out answer choice D, they just reprinted the last sentence of the passage. Yeah, that's true. The author believes it. It's a fact. It's the last thing you read, and I don't think that's by accident. But does that mean that it is the main point? No, of course not. Just because it's true doesn't mean it's the right answer. We haven't been asked for something that was true. Answer choice E. Notice, now that one was much more slippery, because it points to the author's initial cut of ties with Taruskin. But Taruskin has overlooked that there are two ways. But that still is not her main point. Her main point is not to tell us that there are two ways. It is that because there are two ways in which art reflected the elites, because of that, the main point, I've concluded, Taruskin is wrong. And you see how this looks just like what we saw in the logical reasoning? These skills are intertwined. They overlap. Question 8, and it wasn't just for the presence of something like question 8 or the possible presence of it that I said you've got to stop in the second paragraph, understand what you've read. Understanding what you've read is the necessary condition for earning any points, whether or not you're asked directly about that section of the passage. Here, of course, we are asked directly about that section of the passage. What does the author mean when she talks about something for display? Well, she was talking about something that is just meant as a signaling act. The same reason that Matthew Arnold calls the bourgeoisie Philistines, because they are obsessed with their image, with this projecting this image of respectability. So they might be among those more inclined to sponsor art that is just for display. All right. What does the author say about it? That the displays are art that in line 17, no, above line 15, so maybe 14. If you commission a famous architect to design your house, that may reflect great credit on your taste. It's signaling. It's, what is it? Is it peacocking? That doesn't sound exactly right. All right, we're going with it though. Art that C was meant to create an impression that reflected on. And you see, you have the answer, and then it's just a simple match game of finding one that says what the text already said. Number 9 subverted our general expectations a bit. We've talked about this. You want the answer that's closest to the middle here. Unless the subject discussed in the passage is actually engaged in name-calling. Normally, we wouldn't expect Matthew Arnold to be so emotionally invested, but look what he does. The aristocracy are barbarians? The middle class are Philistines? That is scorn. Is it normally the case that we see anybody being scornful? No. But can we pretend that it isn't happening when somebody is actually calling names and saying na 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 na? No. I don't love, obviously, we're building a system. I don't love it when something subverts that system. But as always, the answer is rooted explicitly in the text. And That's what you have to have in order to choose scorn as an answer. You have to have somebody actively, actually scorning people. And right here, Matthew Arnold did. Which probably, I'm making a bigger deal of this than you did because you noticed while you were reading the name calling and you know, were as taken aback by it as I was while reading. So, Matthew Arnold, you rapscallion. For question 10, let's talk about how our big picture understanding can inform this fetch question. This is a passage about these deep-seated socio-historical events that take place in a milieu in which the actors are behaving for complex, complicated, psychological, maybe subconscious reasons, right? So all that to say is that all of that is to say that we are dealing with some deep shit here. So, answer choice A, artists subverting the ideals of patrons for reasons of their own. That sounds like some deep psychological shit. Answer choice B, same sort of thing, you know, talking about a sociological rift. Answer choice C, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's marginal on that socio-psychological historical spectrum. Answer choice D sounds completely out of bounds, though. You know, there's nothing sociological, psychological. I'm splitting up words now. It's just pure economics. It's unlike these others. Answer choice E, we're back in those deep psychological waters that we were dipping our toes in with answer choice A. Now, that by itself, I think, is enough to make us feel quite confident that D is not within the passage, but that doesn't have to be the basis for our answer. We know that the other four are going to be mentioned. In line 29, we get answer choice A. In line 44, we get answer choice B. In line 34, we get answer choice C. And in line 47, we get answer choice E. It's all there. It has to be there, and it is. But you don't have to go hunting and pecking through the passage. You can use the kind of reading we've been engaged in order to get to the right answer much more efficiently. When question 11 asks what the author says Taruskin is committed to, I wouldn't jump to the first paragraph for that. Instead, I would jump to the third and the fifth, because in the third, we say, in order to make the claim that Taruskin makes, one must assume that the elite had this recognizable identity. And one must assume that the artists were not trying to subvert that identity. Right? He is committed to those things. And in the fifth, last paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph, Taruskin, I'm in line 49, must engage in an analog of Freudian analysis. So it's not, you know, what he's committed to, what Taruskin is committed to, is not what he said, but the implications of what he said. And the implications are one of three things. That Taruskin has assumed that the elite had an identity, that Taruskin has assumed that the artists were not trying to subvert that identity, and that Taruskin has assumed that somehow works which the elites overtly disapprove of nevertheless express their ideals. And again, we can have an answer based on the passage before we go into answer choices. The most talented artists, let's look at these answer choices. The most talented artists throughout history. What does Taruskin say about that? What does Taruskin commit to that? Nothing. The most successful artists working today. Taruskin, come on. If it endures, so now we're talking about something old, high art that appears to undermine the ideology of the elite actually supports that ideology in some way. And there's your last paragraph, right? Even work that they overtly disapproved of, nevertheless, he's got to believe that it somehow reflected their ideals. Just to get rid of D and E because we are completists. Typically, art that reflects the ideology is produced by artists who are themselves members of the class. Where did he say that? Where'd that come from? Answer choice E, the most talented artists. And right there, you just got to be very, very wary of that. What does he say about the most talented artists? I mean, it's the same thing we did with A and B. So, first of all, we're answering the question. Secondly, we can use our knowledge of language cues to help direct our focus through answer choices. So, 2 ways to skin this kitty. Question 12, again, we answer the question before looking at answer choices. What is the purpose of that third paragraph? The third paragraph, the critics prefer to deal with the art in the second way because it lets them create their analysis, but in order to do that, they must have assumed 2 things. The purpose of that paragraph, then, to point out the things that Taruskin had to assume in order to mount his argument. To B, identify assumptions relied upon by a type of analysis. If you answer the question, choosing one answer choices is fast and efficient because you know where you waste time. You know where you waste time. You don't need me to tell you this. You waste time comparing answer choices against one another. Stop doing that. 13. Why did the author mention Raphael's frescoes? And they give us a line reference. This is the second way in line 16. The second way is to create a work that expresses and mirrors your ideals. For example, Raphael's statues or sculptures. Why mention Raphael? As an example of the second way. What is the second way? Well, that is the way that Taruskin likes. So it is an example of the method that Taruskin chooses to focus on, that the socio-historical interpretations are generally dealing with. To provide an example that illustrates the understanding of elitism favored by socio-historical critics. Your answer based on the text, not based on trying to guess which response is closest to the truth, but to know that one answer is right. Finally, 14, what did Matthew Arnold say about why the middle class liked art? Matthew Arnold speaks only in that 4th paragraph. The middle class, I'm in line 40, are Philistines. They're obsessed with respectability. This is what we were talking about earlier. They're signaling. Why would they patronize an artist? In order to make themselves look more respectable. A desire to establish a reputation. And that is what this looks like. And so with a big picture structural reading coupled with the consistent ability to answer questions before looking at answer choices, and then the knowledge of what makes an answer choice more or less likely to be correct, we get through this difficult passage as though it weren't such a big deal.